on my mind.
Hello and welcome to episode 24 of The Boxing Show with me, your host Rob Tebber. As always, I'd like to remind everybody to please like, comment and subscribe. Turn your notifications on for more boxing content. Now that's out of the way, we're back after a week off and I am ably joined by the one and only Mr. Barry Jones and Mr. Andy Clark, who has only just recovered from not being in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago. Andy, you got a face like a smacked arse this week, mate. How are you?
Good, yeah. It was a tough watch as the week kind of progressed and escalated. But I thoroughly enjoyed the fight. You know, I got up for the fight. I was at my mum and dad's and I couldn't get it on their TV, but I got up and watched it on my phone. And I set an alert via this ring walk app thing, which is supposed to tell you when the fighters are ring walking. And maybe I slept through that. I don't really know what happened, but I woke up as if by magic about 30 seconds into the first round, so that was lucky. And watching it unfold,
you missed the most competitive part of the fight.
He was drunk in a casino.
I did. Watching it unfold was it was kind of awe-inspiring because I don't think any of us thought that would happen. I definitely didn't think that would happen, and he was just so good. And what you hope when you get that kind of platform for the sport is that you get a great fight. That's the ideal scenario. It wasn't a great fight because it was completely one-sided, but it was a truly great performance. I mean, he's something else because he just beat Spence up and there was nothing he could do about it. Not a thing. And he tried everything. And I thought it was a good stoppage by the ref. He gave him every chance. You know, this is as big as a fight gets. And he got to finish on his feet, which will be a tiny kind of consolation, but it is something at least. But he was amazing, Crawford. He was just... I couldn't quite believe how good he was, to be honest, because you just don't see that against a fighter of that calibre, an opponent of that standard. You just don't.
Before we dissect the fight, today's going to be a bit of a strange show. It was supposed to be the Joshua Whyte preview.
It's always a pretty strange show.
It is always a strange show, that's absolutely right. So we're going to kind of jump about and go back and forth. It's kind of like the Spence Crawford review, the real review, with Andy Clark, of course, joining myself and Barry. And then the preview of Anthony Joshua versus... who knows? Let us know in the comments. But anyway, Barry, how was your week in Vegas? You obviously couldn't be without me for a whole week, so you flew over to come over to Las Vegas to soak up the big fight with me.
The best part of the week is you walk over that bridge, right, from New York to MGM. He's there with tins of paint upside down, banging away like that. $50 in the bucket.
Mate, it's expensive in Vegas.
But you still haven't got changed.
No, I'm actually wearing shout out Top Rank, by the way, today. By the way, I am open to wearing any free t-shirt from anybody, whether it's a promoter,
literally from anybody.
From anybody.
Just take it off and give it to
you and put it on. So shout out Top Rank Boxing. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah, it was a good week one. It was great.
It was great. Yeah.
But who cares about the week? I said this earlier off air. Who cares about the week? That's for us, the week. I mean, the fight was not, again, just exactly what Andy said. The fight wasn't the fight we thought, but the performance was outstanding. You thought he had more ways to win, and he's more athletic, and he got the faster hands and the faster feet, and he moved on the target a lot better. But the strength was always going to be with Spence, and it wasn't. The jab from Crawford won him the fight. The jab won him the fight. I mean, when they both jabbed, I thought that was going to be, if Spence could get the win, and I fancy Crawford, not that way, of course, but I did fancy him big. But you thought the jab was going to be key for Spence, that he can push Crawford back, keep him off balance, because Crawford likes to catch the jab, and I thought the weight of Spence's jab, southpaw, will literally, once he catches it, put him off balance, and then all the things he does off that won't work. But you can see when they were both jabbing at the same time, and he got about 4-inch reach, hadn't he, on him, I think. But when they were both jabbing at the same time, you could see the thudder of Spence when he was taking the shot. It was just, and also just the way he throws it, and it's not much of a change. Just change, you might dip the shoulder a little bit, just change the angle. So when he comes in, he's coming in from this way rather than that. Not always, but just even against a little subtle movement. So even if you're both in the same range, he'll get there first or get more of an impact with the jab. Just fantastic. And then everything off that then made it quite an easy night. I think he hurt Spence really early. I mean, really early, where we didn't really see it, but with that jab, and that's made him think, oh shit. And then from there on, he systematically beat him up. I think the 6th round he could have stopped it. Spence, Crawford himself, I don't think he wanted to. He just wanted to make a real thorough job, make sure he done everything right, and the guy who had nothing left before he really sort of put his foot on the gas. I think he had more gears to go through. I really do. And it was I would probably say, maybe, we all get carried away. They even say, no, he beats Sugar Ray Leonard now and Floyd Mayweather, and I think we got to hold back a little bit. But I would say that might be the best one-sided performance I've seen since maybe Calzaghe Lacey. I mentioned Calzaghe.
Fury Wilder got a few mentions, and I think that was fair because nobody really expected that to happen. But I think Crawford summed it up quite nicely himself. I think he put out a tweet at some point last week where, paraphrasing, but he's talking about how people are ranking the performance and him in all time and all the rest of it, and he said, look, there's not a great deal of point in that, but I reckon I would hold my own basically in any era. And it's very difficult to argue with that. I think.
You can only beat what's in your era, obviously, and some fighters don't get the chance to do that. And we've now seen Terence Crawford get that chance. I think it's quite good that we've had, you mentioned there about the kind of, and we all love it and we're going to do it whatever happens with any fight, but we all have that kind of knee-jerk reaction and that immediate, where the adrenaline's running. So it's quite nice to have this kind of a week removed from the fight, if that makes sense. So we've got a little bit more time to, maybe the takes will be a little bit more, I don't know, considered this time rather than in the immediate aftermath of the fight when you've got the adrenaline running through you. It could be, he's the greatest this, he's the greatest that. But I mean, I can't really think of a fight. I mean, you mentioned Fury Wilder. That's up there, Fury Wilder too. But there's an argument at the time. You got like Joshua around and various other kind of fighters. These are the two that have cleared out the division. This is, for me, that level above Fury Wilder too. And the performance then kind of takes on a new form of credibility, excitement, shock factor, or whatever you want to call it.
They're both arguably top 5 pound for pound in the world. I think the only thing you would maybe argue, Spence maybe might just thought he's in the top 10 for sure, but you could argue he was in the top 5. Crawford certainly was. So it was a generational fight. You've got to give him that credit, and it does put him on another level. He is in the conversation now of top 6 to 8 welterweights of all time. Whether that's down to your own perspective, but I think he is in a conversation for that. He doesn't become, people got carried away, he's the best welterweight who's ever lived, or he would have smashed Sugar Ray Leonard. Like, you've never seen him fight to say that. Or even Floyd Mayweather. People forget, we forgot how good Floyd Mayweather was overnight all of a sudden. But I think you're right though. What Crawford has said about himself, I think that he would be competitive against anybody. I think he has that in him, and he's clever enough. Like, it didn't look like a hard night for him. I mean, no, it didn't look like he had to. It didn't even look like he had to concentrate. I mean, he obviously did, but I mean, it won the fight where there was never and to be fair to Spence, give him his credit, he was losing the fight from the first round. Nothing really happened, and maybe you gave that round to Spence. Everything else, you couldn't give him anything, and he had to go in every round. But never once did he look like, and the crowd oohed and ahed when he landed with a few shots, but never once to me. And I haven't watched it back. I gotta say that. But there, live, never once did Crawford look panicked or worried or even hurt. He got knocked back a little bit, but
no, exactly. I mean,
it might look different on TV.
I've watched it a couple of times, and he was made to give a little bit of ground every now and again by a left hand, but it was the ease of it that was so impressive.
So composed.
He had a look for one round and then just dissected him. It was amazing. I'm not really into punch stats generally, but they can be quite useful sometimes, and I would be very curious to know what his percentage was.
He landed 60% of his power shots.
Wow, I mean that's unheard of.
Yeah, I know.
The only stat you shouldn't have mentioned, you mentioned.
But the 60%,
because
whether it's power punches or no power punches,
I know where Barry's going to go. But we'll let Barry go with it.
No, it's true. But that jab was. They don't mention jabs as power shots. That's where it falls down. I think the stats about when he punches, he's thrown, and when he's landed is relevant, of course. Though you got to, not every punch can really be counted as a punch.
But when you've seen it and you see
I threw enough of those.
But when you see it and you know what the punches were, you think.
But the power shot, because that jab was a power shot.
Yeah.
That jab was a power. Like if that's not called, if that's scored as a power shot, then the stats are fantastic. If it's not, then they're all the shit. I'd have to say that. But either way, the way he just totally dominated everything from pretty much the start of the second round on. Just he was just biding his time before he stopped it.
Where does that stand with, I mean, again, kind of going into the fight, this was always going to be the fight that was going to be who's the best welterweight of the generation, who arguably is pound for pound number one, all of that stuff. And then immediately it goes to, okay, well, can he beat this guy from this generation? Just boxing, isn't it? Every time you get to a kind of a resolution, you look for something else to debate, which is what we've got there. But as far as performance-wise goes in a big fight, where would that rank from kind of recent memory, I suppose? Best performances in a big fight, almost one-sided. Some of the ones that stand out to me, Rigondeaux versus Donaire, but Rigondeaux did get dropped in that fight, flash knockdown as it was, but he did end up on his arse at some point.
But that was a massive win, though.
Massive win, brilliant.
Donaire was absolutely flying at that point.
You're splitting hairs here for one of the greatest performances of the last 15 years. So, I mean, they're all in their own way, generational performances, but is there any that kind of stand out for you that we can put on a similar?
I don't think there are, because in terms of, I do think you do have to take the stage and the platform into account, because it brings a lot of pressure and expectation, and this was the fight, and what we thought might happen would be that it would be really close and there'd be the start of maybe this epic trilogy, but I can't really see that now. And maybe we'll get on to talk about whether he'll take the rematch, Spence, or maybe we won't, but it was just everything about it. It delivered on all fronts. It was for all of the belts. It was for pound, probably. You've got to put him right up towards the top, whatever happens. A second undisputed weight division for him. It was just, it was everything, really. I can't think of any way in which it didn't deliver. And thankfully, no one's really gone down that very tedious route after the fight of trying to claim that Spence wasn't that good in the first place. We get a lot of that, don't we?
Yeah,
sometimes.
A lot of revisionist,
And a few people have said, well, the inactivity, and it's all valid. And I saw somebody put something out last week suggesting that Spencer's neurologically maybe not quite the same now after the crash and things like that. But there's been very little of that, and usually there's quite a lot, because people do like to try and not tear a performance down, but they like to take that contrary view. But you just can't in this case. There's just nothing to back it up.
Yeah, I think even the most, I was going to say even the most ardent of Spence fans, but looking on Twitter, there are some very ardent Spence fans. It probably doesn't apply to those, but I think the most ardent, sane Spence fans can't really argue with how it went. I mean, even if you look at, we said it on the way in about your Dennis Ugas, the performance from Spence against Ugas, arguably the performance of his career. Like he got hurt, got hit with a shot in the middle rounds, but he ultimately won by stoppage in a very impressive performance. So you're only as good as your last outing, as it were. And I think like what this fight's done, no matter whether you talk about Spence's inactivity, the eye, the whatever, the car crash and all of that stuff, I think that regardless of all of that, now you can never ever really look at the fight because of how one-sided it was. Okay, if we'd have got a Spence that maybe didn't go for all of those, maybe, and it's not a guarantee, maybe it would have been a bit more competitive and it wouldn't have been the one-sided bulldozing destruction that it was. But I just don't see how you could ever look at that fight and pick anything out of it and say, oh, well, if Spence would have done, they were in two different leagues on Saturday.
What's clear and what is that he just hasn't made an excuse.
Yeah.
In the post-fight press conference, the people were trying to give him an excuse. Was it the weight?
The first question was about
the weight. And he said,
yeah.
well, weight's always hard to make. And it is. And he does need to move up. And we've known that for a while. And that might have been a factor. Maybe. Then you can say Crawford should still be a super lightweight. So, if you want, I don't think that's the case, but you could argue that case that he's too small for the weight. So, he just it's always hard to make the weight. He just got beat by a better guy. That's it. And all the things, there's always an issue. And he can say I didn't perform well, but that's part of being a great fighter. And this is your biggest fight of your career by a million miles for both of them. And if you didn't turn up, but he did, Crawford did. So whether Spence turned up or not, who knows? But like Crawford did turn up, and he produced what he had to. And your biggest night, you want to put the best fight of your life, whether it's a winning performance or not. You want to put the best effort you can possibly put in. And Crawford didn't have to, but I mean he was there to do it. He was sharp on point with everything he did, timing, judgment of distance, weight of the shots, everything was perfect for him. and it was a massive dominant performance at the highest level. Bam Rodriguez versus Rung Visai maybe goes close, but then.
But Rung Visai at the end of his career.
Yeah, but I mean, and a young kid not quite there yet either. So but I mean, that's very recently. That's probably the closest to it, but nowhere near close either. I would say that. Yeah. This is a stand-up performance.
It's a generational performance. Yeah.
I was saying this all week within boxing. I keep saying the same thing. This was the most significant fight within boxing since Canelo Golovkin. I thought for the health of the sport. For the people involved in the sport, for the health of it, we're getting the fights that we want. I mean, even though it might not transcend beyond the sport, like a Fury fight or any Joshua fight, all those big guys get. For us within it, this was like the fight that we all crave for, beg for, and keeps the sport in a healthy position, and shows other fighters this money can be made if you're willing to fight each other and commit to it. Oh, by the way, Crawford was so good. Then he's arguing with Jamel Charlo.
Once I've won this undisputed title, I'm coming for your one. It was all kind of. I think the whole week, obviously the fight was a massive success for Crawford. Obviously the fight, but I felt like the whole week was a huge success.
No, it was from the outside looking in. You're in the middle of it, but from the outside looking in, it definitely was, because what was always great about it was that you got two fighters there who are just pure fighters, incredibly skillful, but attitude-wise, they're pure fighters. They're never going to take a backward step. And there's always the chance, because there is always the chance that something can flare up and something can happen. And if it had during fight week, then it would have been real. But I was always confident that neither of those two were going to race for the bottom, if that makes sense. It wasn't going to get out of control, and they weren't going to cross that line and end up saying things to each other whereby it brings the sport into disrepute, because I think that's more important now than ever, because previously it may have been tolerated with the excuse of, well, this is boxing, but society's moved on and attitudes have changed, and there are places you can't go kind of insult wise because networks just don't want it, and that's where we are now, and rightly so. But I was always confident that even though you've got two old school, incredibly skillful pugilists, but also if they needed to be ruthless street fighters, that we weren't going to get that, and we didn't. We just got a great week where you look at these two guys and just think, whoa, but at the same time, they were respectful of each other. Jamel Charlo didn't have a great week, did he, to be honest, because Caleb planted one on him backstage.
That was Jamal.
The other one.
Jamal.
Oh, was it?
So it was Jamel's wife and Jamal's ex-wife who were fighting in the car park.
Because where I saw that reported, they said it was the other one. They said it was, okay.
So it was Jamal who got slapped. Who also didn't have a very good week.
I didn't see the incident, but I seen the incident after. But I don't know. I saw that Charlo outside on his phone screaming at someone, like threatening him. Like, so I must have been something to do with that. And obviously after, when I seen the video, it's a good shot. Sort of slaps him, doesn't he? Not
lead left hook was shot. He loves a slap, Caleb Plant, doesn't he? Slap Canelo. He loves a slap.
But Crawford, he was the voice of reason at the press conference, because the two families, or the entourage, whatever you want to call them, they're the ones who are arguing with each other, and Spence just sits there anyway. He don't really care. But it's Crawford who was going, listen, it's not this. We don't want to go somewhere where we can't come back from. Yeah. It's all calmed down. But then Spence's brother kept chipping in, and I was sat about 4 rows behind him. You were sat right next to him,
right behind him, yeah.
And like the look that Crawford gave him, like it was hot, and we all went like that. We all looked on the floor. It was horrible, wasn't it? Like you could see,
it started to get really, It started. I posted a video on Twitter where I was literally sat behind. I think it was Errol Spence's cousin or somebody. It was somebody from his entourage, and you can just see at the press conference where it started to build, and then Crawford just takes that one look, and then his eyes are fixed on him. Then, and I was sat behind him, and I was sort of, because I mean, it didn't go over. It didn't go over the top by any stretch of the imagination, but it did have that. And it was the only thing that we'd kind of missed a little bit from the grand arrivals and the workouts, where there wasn't quite, and then we just had it. So I'm sort of sat there, and as it's all kicking off, I'm going, oh, this is great. And I start smiling. And I see Crawford look at him, and I think, if he sees me smiling and thinks that I'm smiling at what he's saying, so I immediately go.
There's something really impressive about someone just being able to send that shiver down your
A
spine.
real
with
hard
a look.
man. Like
Yeah.
he says to him, "You talk too much." He's like, "Real ones don't need to talk." He's like,
Yeah.
"You talk too much." And
I
then I
love
was sort of
that.
sat there and watching it. And we came up to each
but
other afterwards, and we go, "This is great.
But if
Like,
that,
this is what we wanted."
if that kicks off, chairs are being thrown. That goes.
I mean,
that goes
Crawford,
too
I thought
far,
was very
that
good because he said, "Look, we don't want everybody to say that every time we get up together and there's shooting and there's fights and there's arguments." So he was very good about it, but he was also very kind of Crawford about all of it. So if you want it to go the
We
wrong
can do
way,
that
we
if you
can
want
do
to.
that, but
Yeah.
let's not do that. And I thought
I
it was
wonder
really
what
good.
the promoter's thinking. Is he thinking, "Go on, keep going," or because
I don't know. I think you get the fear of it if you're the promoter at that point.
But in this
Well,
day,
it goes
in
back
this
to what
day
you've
and
said,
age,
yeah.
in this day and age, everything sells, isn't it? And the two fighters being respectful to each other
Yeah.
is unfortunately.
I don't know.
It's
I
not
think
good TV anymore.
I know what you mean, but I just feel like there might be a
wasn't
little
what this one
bit.
was sold on,
Yeah,
was it?
and I feel like there might be a little bit of a shift with that recently because we see how we see some of the ludicrous carry on with the influencers and how contrived all of that is, and just what absolute horseshit the whole thing is. And that's how they try and sell it. They're forever rolling around on the floor and throwing water at each other. And if you're pro boxing, you've got to look at that and just think, that's nothing to do with us. We need to differentiate ourselves from that. We are a sport, a proper, well-established, brilliant sport. That is not us. We're better than that. So I just feel like maybe things are coming back the other way for us, and I hope it is.
You don't ever want to see anything contrived. You don't want to see anything that's clearly cooked up. And as you mentioned there, they're clearly not those types of characters either, Spence and Crawford.
No.
So if it would have come, it would have felt like it had come out of left field a bit, and it would have felt contrived. But also, kind of the flip side to that is, we don't want to ever lose sight of the fact that ultimately it is what does really sell fights in a sense of like having if it's organic and there's that natural strife between them and they really want to hurt each other, that is what pulls people in. And that was the one thing that we'd said at the start of the week. It just didn't quite it had the edge of two alpha males but it didn't quite have that little extra bit of spice.
That's what you were saying,
and that's
really,
what we got.
Do you know what's
I'm all for
interesting?
that.
I know the crowds play a part, and at the weigh-in it was pro Spence, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It felt like, but on the night, in the build-up, it felt like a Crawford crowd. They showed on the big screen. They showed Crawford and Spence, but there was a bigger cheer for Crawford. But then, just before the main event, it was pro Spence again, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pro Spence again. Although
interesting.
when Eminem came out, it became pro Crawford a little bit as well for the time,
Yeah,
which
it was-
that was great. I mean,
a different feel, because that whole song and everything about it feels
It
like
works,
Crawford's
didn't
life,
it?
doesn't it? You know what I mean? Like,
and like you could have somebody not taking shots at any fighter, but you could have somebody come in to lose yourself on a 6-rounder at York Hall, couldn't you? At 6 o'clock,
Yeah.
doesn't have the same.
No.
But if Ryan Garcia walks into that, you're going, well, not really, Ryan.
Yeah,
Ryan's might have a hard life, but
It really fit,
But the way he
didn't it?
looks, nothing about him looks like that. He's
Yeah.
a good-looking guy.
It rings true.
He looks
doesn't
like he's had all
Yeah.
these. Even though
Crawford.
he probably hasn't. It looks like he's had an easy life because he's so pretty. But like he probably hasn't. But I mean, that you couldn't sell it. But Crawford, we know we're going to be shot in the face, in the neck, haven't he? And you just think. And he looks like a hard man. He looks like he looks like every day he's been a struggle for him.
Has he used that before?
I don't think so.
I mean, it's always been an absolutely potentially classic ring walk track, hasn't it? But like you say, it depends when you use it, and to use it for that fight, and for him to use it, it works. It really, it couldn't have worked any better.
And I thought the promotion throughout the week was fantastic. I don't feel like anybody. There was no push to make it unsavoury when it didn't need to be.
And that's the word unsavoury, because I'm not saying that I'm not all for a bit of bite. I absolutely am. But I just don't want pantomime antics.
Yeah, you've got to be real, haven't it?
Yeah.
And that's the whole presentation of the week was these are the two best guys, undisputed, unprecedented, whatever. And it kind of had all of that. Anyway, right, back to the fight itself. First round was very tentative, Barry, as you've mentioned there. The second round exploded into life with the first knockdown from Crawford. And for me, I don't know how you feel, it didn't look as though Spence ever, whether physically or mentally, quite recovered from that second round.
He didn't. I thought Crawford was going to jump on him. I think he could have.
He almost did, didn't he? It was only 30 seconds or so, 15, 20 seconds.
But I think he could have still. He just didn't. I think he was so zoned in. He didn't want. He just thought, I'm doing this the sensible way, the best way I know best. It's like he knew he was better than Spence. Yeah. That's what it felt like. But yeah, I don't think Spence recovered. I think Spence got it with a jab before that, way before that, and felt it and sort of went, that's not meant to happen. Not this. No, you felt that. If someone asked me on the day before, who's the bigger puncher, Spence or Crawford, and I went like, I think Spence is heavier with the shots, but I think Crawford got better snap because he sort of hits with those front two knuckles. More explosive as well. He chops down. I've said this the other day. He chops down with his shots, not like Golovkin, but because he's long, because he's got a crazy long reach, but he does sort of loop him over, so he hits you with those front two knuckles, so you get that real sting when he hits you. And I think so. I think probably Crawford's the bigger puncher, but the weight of the shot's going to be with Spence. So that's why I thought when they both were meeting with jabs, it would be Crawford who would take, if he didn't get it right, would take the impact. But it wasn't. And I think that shocked Spence and panicked him a little bit. And yeah, he got beat up. That's the truth of it. Like, we can talk way around if you like, but ultimately he just sort of slowly got beat up. And he's brave and he's a world-class fighter and he's brilliant when he's on top. As is Derek James when he's not brilliant, but I think they were in a situation they'd never been in before. They've been in hard fights, so they've had to fight for adversity before. Of course, they've been with some really good fighters, and he's had to tough it out, Spence, and he can. And he tried to then, and he showed he got plenty of ball, but they were in a situation where they had no answer for anything. And I think they as a team, they were lost.
That's kind of where I was going with it from the second round. I felt like the first round, not an awful lot happened, and I felt like Spence, after that second round, you could just see the I'd spoke to somebody after the fight, and it reminded me...
Somebody?
Yeah, anyway. It reminded me a little bit of Fury Wilder 2, where Wilder has that look on his face where he goes, oh God, like this isn't supposed to happen. And you can just see the confidence completely drain out of him. And it just looked like he could never ever quite get it back. And after that, he was tentative. Everything Spence threw was kind of... I know he committed to the shots in the sense of kind of trying to stay in there and trying to win the fight, but it just didn't look like he had any belief in his work.
I've said this before, like people like Naz would do it obviously, but they make you miss, make you pay sort of theory. But once someone hurts you, and when someone fires off your punches and makes you pay for it, then the panic, or you tense up because you know I got to get this right. Especially when they hit hard, especially like Naz would do that, he'd make you miss and go pam, and you'd feel it straight away. And then everything from there then is a worry, because every time you throw a shot, you've got to make sure it's perfect. You know, I've got to get this right. But with that, once you're thinking, oh, I got to get this right, as you're thinking it, your whole back tenses up, your neck tenses up, and you constrict your muscles.
You're less likely to get it right, aren't you?
Exactly.
And it slows you down. You end up going like this, and slows you down, and your distance is not right because you contract the muscles. It's only like that much shorter, but that much shorter sometimes for a boxer is punches through the target or touching the target. And I think they do that too. They slow you down, make you think about everything you do, and that secondary thought process ruins you. Golovkin does it with his feet with the pressure. Canelo does it with his feet with the pressure, and Crawford does it by firing off your punches. I didn't think he could do it that easily and comfortably against Spence.
No,
the difference between Spence and Wilder is Wilder just went into panic mode straight away, didn't know what to do. Spence never. I mean, he kept trying, but he had been slowed down and became more readable, and yeah.
It's amazing to see it happen in that kind of a fight, and that's what was so astonishing about it, because if you're Errol Spence, and this doesn't like speak to any complacency on his behalf, but if you're Errol Spence, you've got to a level where you really don't think that can happen to you, that you can get in there with somebody who you can't do anything with and who shocks you and panics you. You'd be fully justified in thinking that, well, that's not going to happen to me. I mean, maybe earlier in your career you might think, oh, what level am I, where can I get to? You get to where he is, and it just wouldn't really enter your head as being something that could happen. I know it's something that you can't ever afford to think about really anyway, but boxers, I find, there's a kind of cut-off point. Maybe it's when they go into camp where they'll decide that none of the things that are possible in boxing are going to happen. But prior to that, they do entertain them and think about them, because it can kind of help deal with the consequences should they further down the line. But then they have to just decide, okay, all that stuff that, you know, I've realised could happen, from this point onwards it can't. And that's how you have to look at it. But it would have been just a mind-blowing experience for Spence, I think, in there, to be honest with you. And I don't really know how you sell that defeat to yourself, because there's no... how do you explain it? In a way other than... he got schooled.
Yeah, I mean, there's getting schooled, and then he was really demolished. It was a complete one-sided. Like, we spoke about it in the build-up, we spoke about it on the preview show, about kind of the only thing that would have surprised me about the fight was a dominant one way or the other. Like, I could just never expect one fighter to not be, not in a disrespectful way, to not be good enough to kind of, I expected maybe Spence would hold, keep his distance early on and get behind a jab and be nice and compact like we've seen him, and then Crawford would have to work into the middle rounds, and I could never see it being so dominant. And I think like that was the discussion in the build-up, which is where we're going to go to next, which was, how does somebody usurp Navarrete in a way as the pound for pound number one? And the only way that anybody could really say one way or the other was if Spence or Crawford does an absolute number on the other one, and that's what we saw. So with that being said, we've already spoke to Barry about it. So Andy, going to come to you. Crawford pound for pound number one on the back of that?
Yeah, I think he has to be, because you just look at sheer numbers and they don't always tell the story. Stats could be manipulated, obviously, but the reality is that he's become undisputed in 2 different weight divisions, and no other active male fighter has done that. In a way, might do it pretty soon. We'd imagine he'll box to Valdez, and it's hard to see him not winning that fight. You never want to write somebody off completely, but it's hard to see that not happening. So I think it's an open and shut case, really. It's Crawford. It has to be him.
It might be a tennis match with these two, which would be like he beats Valdez, he goes number one again, and then Crawford got to beat the next guy, and Charlo or whatever, he moves up in weight, and it'll be back and forth with them two, maybe. But yeah, you've got to say he's like look who he just beat, and
how he did it.
And but even if he just beats him, I thought it was enough, because the quality of opposition for this fight, because he's already in that power, is better than Stephen Fulton. Yeah. Stephen Fulton's a really good fighter.
Yeah,
but you're right. Unfortunately, that's and you sort of like, you can be lucky and unlucky about fighters around your weight, but when you're a great fighter, having other great fighters around your weight is a gift. I mean, it cements you as an all-time great. That's what happens. And you're lucky. Leonard was lucky to have Duran and Hearns, and then Duran moved up, and then they moved up to fight Hagler. They were lucky they were close enough around that space. It looked like Hagler was going to miss out on all those fights because he was too big for him originally. Never too big for Hearns, but he was always going to go up. But didn't, like Leonard, maybe to go to middleweight was a stretch, and Duran, it's just my size, isn't it? You know what I mean? Unbelievable. But so you never thought you'd get those fights that put him. No, he was always going to be known as one of the greatest middleweights, but never maybe an all-time great, because but he didn't fight those marquee names.
Dance partners.
He still looks fresh as well, doesn't he? I mean, he's 35, but he's obviously always lived a life.
He's just never had
he's not really had a hard fight.
Like, he had a close fight with Sean Porter until he decided to take it up to that extra level, but even that wasn't a hard attritional fight.
No, but that's the hardest one he's had.
Yeah, that was on. But it was a close fight
that he was
on his terms. That I think people forget that. But he's mentioned retirement for maybe the first time.
I mean, you know better than me, but it's the grind, isn't it? You know, he hasn't taken any shellackings, but it's the grind. At some point, you get a bit more civilised, you fulfilled those ambitions, the hunger isn't really there anymore.
He's had 40 fights now.
Yeah, that's a lot of fights, that's a lot of training.
A lot of time away from the family.
This money for this fight is different to the others. Yeah. This is the real, like, I genuinely don't know. Before, he didn't money to go, I don't need to work again. If I'm sensible, I can still live a really nice life. But now it's like, I don't need to work again and be sensible.
And my kids probably won't have to work again.
You can just take the edge off it, can't it? And then as soon as you've got that, if even that razor edge of desire gets blunted, then, and you're at that level, there's probably still plenty of people out there you could beat, but at the same time, if you get it right, you feel like, this is the right time. This is the right time to go now.
It won't be his desire to fight. Like the way Charlo's at, because they love it. Don't they? Don't come across as the nicest people, but no, they might be. but that the fight with them, that's Crawford lives for things like that. I feel. He won that, but like as you mentioned, the whole training camp, the grind, all that is that the thought of doing that again sometimes.
You could go one of sort of two ways. You could see Crawford being the type of character to go, yeah, I don't really want to do it anymore, I'm done, and that's it. You could see him doing that, but you could also see the bad guy, nasty guy in him who sees a Jamel Charlo. I mean, who knows what happens with him after he boxes Canelo. Jamal's still at 160. I'm sure he'd fight either one of them at whatever weight if the opportunity was there. That side of him might keep him in the game, where it's like, okay, again, that kind of alpha male dominant side of him. But you could also see him being the type of character who just goes, oh, I've done everything I wanted to, I've made plenty of money, see you later.
And he might get 10 million for boxing Tim Tszyu. And go, well, that's $10 million for boxing Tim Tszyu, which is a hard fight, but I think he'll be a massive favour for that. But you might think that, so that money will give you, I can do the training camp. Kind of might decide, I'd fight tomorrow. I'm an old man, I'd fight tomorrow. I'd love to fight it. I can't, but I'd love to. But then we forget about how hard it is to train. Forget about the making the weights bad enough, like that. But I mean, just training itself and the thought. And when I really think about the thought of training, you forget how hard it is. I mean, when you're fit, you live it. I live for it. But it's difficult. I can't even put into words how difficult it is. Like a proper hard when you've really trained for a big fight, with the pressure, everything around you. And for these guys who are the pressure's magnified because it's a bigger fight than for most of us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You don't really get the feeling that he's kind of thinking, well, I could maybe go 51-0 or whatever.
No, I don't think he really
he's too far away from that, and I don't think he cares.
No, I don't think he cares. I think he, again, similar to what he said about I think he's very content. Certainly now. I mean, I'm sure he was before.
I mean, it is really, really difficult to see anybody out there in the kind of medium-term future who could beat him.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think he'd have to only be up at 154. I know Boots Ennis and people are talking about that, but it's a punt, surely. If you're picking Boots Ennis to beat Terence Crawford on the back of that, it is a punt, and we all know how good Boots is. We're all big fans of him. We think he's the next up, but still.
But that's the fight. I think that's the fight. Talking about great welterweights of all time, I think that's the fight that gives him a bigger step because he beats the biggest rival of his era,
and then beats the next one,
and then beats the guy who's the most certainly gonna be the next guy. I think that puts him that, and then because then that will age well because Boots Ennis will go on to reign. I think.
Yeah, it would be not because he's not had the fanfare and the adulation that certainly after the back of his performance against Spence definitely has deserved in his career, and he now is sort of 35. It'd be nice to see him have it doesn't need to go on for as long, but nice to see him have a Hopkins style career now where he has his big wins later on in his career, your Pavliks and your Trinidads and things like that, and then kind of goes from there and has his big fights then and becomes the superstar that he clearly and should have been. But
it takes a really, it's often the way that it takes a long time to really get to the big money. Not that many, very, very few fighters get there, obviously. And once you're there, there's got to be something in your brain that thinks, I just need to stay here for a bit longer. And it can't always be just about the money because that won't sustain you for that long ultimately, because when you all start, it was never about that.
But he's kind of done that now, hasn't he? He's done the achievement side. Yeah,
but I remember I was talking to Frotch about this the other week, and he retired after that second fight against Groves, and he said to me that going into it, he kind of knew that would be his last fight, which isn't really what he said previously. But then he did go into that training camp for about a day for the fight against Chavez and realised it definitely really is all over, because he says he's got people saying to him, listen, you worked really hard to get to this point where every fight you have is going to be huge money. You kind of owe it to yourself to have a couple more, but he just knew that it was over, and I guess you get to that point with it, but you wouldn't feel like Crawford's there yet, just because there just seems to be so much more in the tank.
Yeah, and we just love to see it. I mean, I'm kind of certainly not a Crawford detractor in my time, but certainly I felt like I've had Crawford as probably pound for pound top 5 for the last 7 or 8 years, but it's taken until now to get that elite name, that signature win on his resume. Admittedly, freeweight world champion, former undisputed champion at 140. But for me, we did a top 5 biggest wins or best wins of Crawford's career before the Spence fight, and I had number 1 was Victor Postel, which I thought he did a better job on Postel than anybody at the time. Postel showed years later that he was still a world-class fighter, and he battered him, completely dominated him.
It just seemed a bit underwhelming, the undisputed at super lightweight.
Yeah, exactly. In Dongo, as a unified champion, with all due respect, I mean, you saw what happened. Giasov stopped him in a couple of rounds. Regis Prograis stopped him in a couple of rounds. That wasn't that win to hang your hat on. Now he's got that against not just a top guy, but in some people's instances, a pound for pound guy. That is the one. Now he's the guy now. He's beaten outside of Gervonta Davis.
I would say about
the pay-per-view star in America, certainly on PBC, their roster. You could argue Wilder, but against the right dance partner, you'd have to argue Wilder. But a win over Spence in that manner on such a big platform, that now really kind of solidifies him as a pound for pound great of any era. There's no way that anybody can go, well, what's his best win? Or, he beat that guy when he was this, or Sean Porter retired, or anything like that. I'm sure people have, admittedly, thankfully, quite a small percentage of them have talked about Spence and the weight, the accident, the eye, all of this, but that doesn't really carry any weight when you consider what had happened in the fights before and the manner of the performance. He's got that now. There isn't really anything to pick holes at anymore with Crawford, because he's done it at 147 against my number one welterweight of the era up until that Saturday night, because he had the best wins and the most consistent wins at the weight, whereas Crawford hadn't quite had that. There's no real room for argument anymore, is there?
No, I don't think so. No, when you actually before the fight, you saw this breakdown their best wins, and you add, all of a sudden you're looking at Crawford and going, oh, Porter. All of a sudden, and then but Spence had a better Porter, arguably, and then you go Postal as well, and you go, and it was a really good win, and the rate they fighter, but then you're struggling then for real. Beltran maybe it was a good win.
I think the top five,
Ricky Burns, but all of a sudden you're going down, you and you think actually there's no real marquee stellar win. I would say about moving through weights, it's fantastic to do it, but I think boxers again, it's way too much credit for it. But he's gone through weights. Well, yeah, but you can cherry pick more than ever before. And what if you're a cruiserweight? You can't go through weights. So there's a bridge of weight if you want to go to that ridiculous fucking weight. But they can't be a 3-weight world champion, because there's only one step up unless you want to lose 3 stone and go down to light heavy, whatever it is, stone and a half. No, it's just too much. Do you know what I mean? So I think sometimes the fact that Spence dominated his weight, there's a lot to be said for that, of discipline to stay at that same weight for such a long time, and beating all comers and all challengers. That in itself it's quite a phenomenon nowadays. Marvin Hagler doesn't get discredited for staying at middleweight all his career, because he dominated his era at that weight and became arguably, and I think the best middleweight of all time. Sugar Ray Robinson maybe would be in the argument depending where you put him, welterweight or middleweight, but. So going through weights is not always, but he's gone through all those weights, because,
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
If you're beating the number one every all those weights, or number two maybe, then. And
he was kind of a victim as well at 140 of that post Danny Garcia era. He missed those guys with Danny Garcia, Lucas Matisse.
I think he beats them all.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think he beats all of them as well. Yeah. But he didn't have those big names, and we hate it, but he was wrong side of the street, so to speak, for those big fights and for those welterweight fights in particular. I think if he'd have gone to PBC 5 years ago or whatever, and we don't know people's situations, we can kind of speculate on what we see on Twitter and stuff, and he would have gone through Thurman, Porter, Danny Garcia, Adrian Broner, like those names at welterweight, instead of Kavaliauskas, Amir Khan, Kell Brook, and those, certainly the latter two, were nowhere near their best at the time. Jeff Horn, Jose Benavidez Jr. is really a 140, got shot. He didn't have those, but he's got them now, which is kind of what it's nice to see.
Him and Broner.
Broner would have just talked himself into an almighty arse whooping in that fight, wouldn't he? Could you imagine what Terence Crawford would have? He would have absolutely played with him as well. He would have made it last as long as it could have lasted. But
the build-up would have been fantastic.
It would have been fantastic.
Someone's getting shot.
Yeah, and
the build-up.
Yeah, my money wouldn't have been on Crawford being the one who gets shot. But yeah, anyway, right. So we're going to move on, because we have to talk about a big heavyweight fight this weekend. Who nobody knows who is contesting it. But anyway, Terence Crawford. Who next for him, Andy?
I think you go and fight.
Charlo's boxing Canelo.
Yeah,
so
but quite soon.
Yeah,
quite soon.
End of September.
Will he come back down? Or?
If he comes back down, and he keeps saying that he will, then I think that is the fight, because they've got that ready-made rivalry and kind of history there. So I think if you're Crawford, that would be the one that would get your juices flowing most. That he would want most, surely, I'd have thought.
Barry?
Yeah, it's going to be Spence. That's his next fight for sure. But the fight
interest you at all? The rematch?
Not really. But then I would say though, did
Fury Wilder 3.
Fury Wilder 3, yeah. Or Chisora and and just slot a name in.
Yeah.
But I was
going to say one we will caveat that. Sorry to interrupt. Is that for every Fury Wilder 3, there is a Fury Chisora 3 as well.
Yeah, exactly. No, but Chisora had a good rematch with somebody. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Joseph Parker. It was a good fight. It was a good fight to watch.
He had a rematch with Parker. Yeah, but he got.
But either way, it might be a better, more competitive fight at super welter like Whittle, but I don't think so. So I'd like to see him Tim Tszyu or Ennis or Charlo's the main one, but I'd love to see him in Ennis.
I don't think Charlo will go back to 54. I think he's been big at the weight for such a long time. Goes up to 168, earns however many million to box Canelo.
And he fights his brother then for.
I mean, I'd watch it.
60 million.
I'd watch it.
Yeah, you would. You're new media sickle.
But yeah, Jamal, I don't see him going back to 54.
To drop a stone.
Yeah, particularly at this stage of his career, he's been making welterweight, super welter for a long time. He'll have a big payoff, and he's not the most active of fighters anyway. So he has a year out after he gets paid $4 million or whatever, $5 million for Canelo. 154, I think, would be a stretch for him. I don't want to see the rematch. I don't think. The first fight was so one-sided, and yes, we can talk about Fury Wilder 2 and Fury Wilder 3, but also like the purses for that fight, that is going to be a lot of money to put up for a rematch. That how well does that sell? Given I'm sure Spence was great in the post-fight press conference, and he didn't mention any excuses, and he gave all the credit to Terence Crawford. And I think. For once, I know we always try not to anyway, but on this we've spoken pretty much about Terence Crawford throughout, which is the way it should be given the manner of his victory. But even if Spence did struggle at 147, which I think is probably fair to say he did, as did Crawford. Crawford said after the fight as well.
He may well come up with a few excuses in the coming weeks.
But I just don't think they're going to be big enough.
No, I know, but
unless
I think...
he goes down the Wilder...
That process might start because...
I'm sure it already has.
Because in the ring... and in the immediate aftermath, fighters do tend to kind of hold up their hands. Wilder did after that second fight straight away. And then, of course, other stuff followed. Eubank Jr., after Liam Smith, in the immediate aftermath, held up his hands. And then, of course, 25 minutes later, it all begins. So in his head, Spence, it has to have started. It has to have done.
One of our most talked about things.
Yeah,
on the pod,
it is, because it's just so fascinating. And he will probably never have, like I said before, it will never have entered his head that he would have to go through this kind of justification process to make him believe in himself again. It'll be mind-blowing to him that's where he is. But he has got to do it. And as a motivatory tool, there being a massive gulf between you and the other guy, that's not going to work.
No, and I think one thing that Wilder had going for him that Spence doesn't is just that one punch knockout power that he can catch you with a shot at any given moment and chin you.
But also they could sell the third fight, the second. They could sell that on clips in the first fight. I knocked him down, he risen from the ashes, all that crap. But it was true.
And it's two big lumps as well.
And in the second fight, he got it wrong, and Fury batters him. So who's going to get the third decider? It was a selling point there. But this one, especially made no excuses, it makes it even harder to sell.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I just don't know. Don't know how it's.
What about Tim Tszyu in Australia on a Sunday morning?
That'd be great, and he'll be the world champion by that point as well. The WBO have already announced that Jamal Charlo. He'll be the world champion until he steps in the ring, and then when he steps in the ring, he gets stripped.
Yeah.
So what they should do is they should bring the WBO title and just get Paco Valcarcel to jump in and grab the belt and run off through the crowd.
They should get one of those guys. They did in the snooker with those orange bomb things.
Yeah.
Check it on him.
Yeah, Paco Valcarcel with a Just Stop oil bomb to get in the way. But anyway. But yeah, so that could happen. Tim Tszyu versus Terence Crawford. One thing I will say is I don't think now Crawford's had that win. I mean, who knows how many pay-per-view buys it's done. It's all bollocks. Yeah. But let's say it's done well, which I think it's fair to say it has. We don't know how well it's done or what have you. I think Crawford's next fight got to be in Vegas, or it's got to be in the US time zone. I think if he boxes in Australia, okay, great, because they'll do 60,000 people or whatever. Is the gate for that? I mean, they've tried to build Tszyu over in the States now. He's got Costa Tszyu, and he's got they've done a good job with him. It's doable,
there.
Yeah, so they could do that in Vegas, but if he does go to Australia, they have to do 60,000. The prices are going to have to be sky high, and they're going to have to do it for a US time zone. And is that Crawford ain't boxing at 2 PM on the West Coast?
And that'll be like 10 o'clock in the morning when this.
So Crawford will be whether they did with Pacquiao Horn. They did Pacquiao Horn that way. But yeah, I don't want to see the rematch. I felt like, look, we've given Crawford his flowers, which I think we should have done, and we have. I think Errol Spence was really poor against Terence Crawford. I thought he boxed. Two things can be the same. Two things can be applicable. Terence Crawford could have boxed fantastically, generational talent, unbelievable pound for pound start, and Errol Spence could have underperformed. I think both are true personally. I think the Spence that we've seen in the past, I felt like what we spoke about, the fact that he's so usually quite fundamentally sound, nice and compact, I felt like it was a really, really poor performance from Spence. And that's why I felt like it was so one-sided, because you had one guy who underperformed, the one guy who, whether he overperformed or that's just his level and has always been his level, just completely trounced him because of it. That's how I kind of interpreted the fight and why I don't want to see a rematch.
I would say with someone like Crawford or Spence, who punches direct and straight inside his body frame, which you should do. Got to turn on your punches. That's why every punch is solid and hard. But with a straight puncher like that, someone like Crawford, who's massively more athletic and punches on angles, that suits him.
Yeah.
Because every punch you throw straight, he can work off that. You just know, once you throw a jab, he's coming this way, like that. So many different angles to hit you from. So that he can work off that better than he work off a guy who's been more compact and swing shots like a Porter, for instance. Makes it a bit more difficult for him to read his work. I always thought the weight of the shot was going to be important for Spence, and important that he started fast and didn't let Crawford get into a rhythm or read your rhythm. But he couldn't do it. So he might have underperformed, but I think it was a lot to do with the way Crawford settled.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not trying
he
to
hurt
take
him so early. And you could say about Spence, he should have just pushed through. When he's a tough fighter. He's dig through before, but not like this. Not when you're going to throw. Like, I go back to what I said earlier. If you throw a punch, if you don't get it right, because he punches. I would say with Spence punches long. So and really it works for him because he turns from the core and transfers the weight over. So that right hand's even longer. And what that does, even if he doesn't really punch through the target properly, it stops you from fighting back, because you have to, it puts you out of range. You got to take too many steps back, because he's always been too big for the weight, haven't he? He's always been bigger than everyone he's boxed and longer than everyone he's boxed, and he couldn't use that. So he knew every time I throw a punch, it's not going to be long enough or strong enough to stop you from fighting back. And once that, again, that secondary thoughts in your brain, it slows you down and makes you underperform.
Yeah, again,
I think you got to give all the credit to Crawford.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not trying to detract from Crawford's performance at all. I thought he was fantastic, and I don't believe that the fight would have been any different at any different stage of his career. Maybe as I said earlier, the manner of the win for Crawford might have been slightly less emphatic than a brutally one-sided 9-round execution, which is what we saw.
Yeah, it was a good
But I thought Spence was poor.
No,
it
is worth looking at. And I feel like when he sat down at the end of the first round, Spence, I think maybe in his head what he's expecting is probably 2 or 3 more of them, and then maybe we'll really get going. And then what happened in the second round mentally put him in a place that he's never been in before. And actually, the ruthless truth is he couldn't handle it. That's what happened. And I can understand how that can happen to someone, but should he have been better equipped to handle it? Should he have been... I don't know. I really don't know.
Things that you can train for it.
That's exactly. James said afterwards, didn't he? He said his timing was off. He said, I could tell early that his timing was off. Spence said the same thing, that he felt his timing was off.
That weight sometimes makes you lethargic.
This is I don't want to, because Spence hasn't gone out and said it outright. I was killing myself to make the weight. He's been very good about it, but he looked... I don't want to get into the territory, but Spence looked like he was fried at the weight to me.
But it's not always, it's how you make the weight sometimes. Sometimes you might do something in build up that's not how you should. You didn't try as hard, you ate a little bit more on that day when you shouldn't, whatever it is. And then making the weight, you can make the weight easy or hard, depending on how disciplined you are. But so sometimes making the weight, you drop it too quick, and that makes you a bit lethargic in a fight. But also, you can't train for it until it's happened to you, and even then you can't really train for it. I've been hurt in fights, for instance, like that, and it hasn't changed my outlook on how I'm going to approach every other round. I've also been hurt in fights where I've gone, shit, I don't know, what do I do? What do I do now? Because I'm not going there again, because he's going to fucking hit me. I don't want to get it, because it hurts. I mean, I've been hurt where I don't know where I am hurt. And some fighters just naturally fight off that. Some fighters panic and fall away. Some fighters look for the floor or whatever your thing is. But most fighters will just be overcautious and then not do anything. That's what happens with a lot. But then you do expect someone like Spence, who's beyond good, to not react that way. I think he got hurt really early. I think that was it. He got hurt really early and just went, oh, this is not what I thought. What do I do now?
Yeah,
rather than process it quick enough to just carry on.
I think that's exactly it.
He's been hurt in the past, but he's just fired through because he'd had a bit of success or knew he'd have success. In this one, he was so wary of not making a mistake that he didn't do anything.
And that's the thing, is when he was able to get on the inside as well, which is where I think we all expected him to have his success. If he was going to have his success, it would be that attritional, physical Errol Spence on the inside. But he just wasn't able to get his shots off. Crawford pushed him back early in the fight. I think it might have been the second round or the third round. And you could hear the crowd go, oh, because no one expected it. Crawford grabbed him and threw him back. And then once he did that, you could again, it was like one of those little microcosms in the fight where Spence had just gone, oh shit, that's not supposed to happen. I'm supposed to be the big guy. And then when he got on the inside, the shots, and this is kind of what I was saying about the poor performance from Spence and the fact that he is usually so compact and so boxes so neatly. The elbows were out and he's swinging from back here, and it's just not things that we'd seen from him in the past. But Crawford kind of managed to, in less than 6 minutes really, show him that if we want to do it at distance, we can do it at distance. If you want to do it on the inside, we can do it on the inside. I can hurt you, I can outbox you. How do you want to do it?
That's what I mean. Like mentally, that is just the bleakest place you can ever be in, I think, really. And boxing's not like other sports, you know, it just, there's so little time to kind of process it and turn it around, I guess. And there was just nothing, there wasn't a single second of encouragement for him in that fight. It was over at the end of the second round. And I wouldn't say I knew that at the time, but I mean, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was finished. And if he put his foot on the gas a bit more, like Barry said, I think he probably could have finished it sooner, Crawford. But
do you think there's a case for this fight to have been stopped slightly earlier?
I thought the referee. Yeah, I mean, I can understand why people would say that. A few people, you know, I know and respect very much, said they thought it could have been stopped a bit earlier, and I accept that argument. But I felt like the stoppage was well timed. That he had given him every chance to show that he might be able to just get a foothold, let alone turn it around, and he hadn't shown that. I thought he got it right, the ref. I thought
it was a good stoppage from the referee, but I think a
lot
of the questions are about the corner. Barry, what do you think? Because you've been in that situation. It's the biggest fight of your life.
It's a big, and also with the corner, they're so involved in the fight that I think sometimes you can be solely just so invested in trying to win the fight and trying to turn things around, whatever you're trying to do, that you almost forget about this. You would say that you don't forget about the welfare of the fighter, but you're involved in it, so you can understand that. That's why there's a referee there and other people. But the fight of this magnitude, and for how good he is, Spence, and how tough he's shown in the past, you do give him as long as you possibly can because you want to win the fight. I would say about fighting inside, before the fight, I was saying how good Spence was with when he gets close, he brings that forearm on your chest, and that maintains the space so we can throw that uppercut through the middle. And also, he puts that shoulder on your chest as well sometimes, and leans, again, because he's a bigger guy, he always would lean on his opponent, and they're pushing back, and that's tiring him out. And then when they do that, then he can just take a little lean back and throw that uppercut again. So he either maintains the space or creates the space by doing that, but it's always leaning on you all the time. Crawford grabbed that right arm straight away. Brilliant it was. He grabbed that right arm, and he put his shoulder in the chest, on the chest of Spence. Spence can't work. So every time they got close, if they weren't fighting, he grabbed that, and he turned as well. So he turned away from the referee. The referee never warned him for it. He grabbed the arm. He grabbed Spence's arm with two arms and just and put his shoulder right in his chest, and that took away everything that what Spence could do when he did get close, even whether he was advancing or usually Crawford was getting close. He just couldn't work. Couldn't push him because he's too busy trying to pull his arm back. And he had no target to hit because literally the one arm he's got there, that left arm, that one arm he's got to use, Crawford put his back against him, to put his back onto that and put his chest in here. So he can't hit anything. Unless he hits him on the back of the head. Just took away his arsenal. Took away his ability to use his physical presence. Took it all away by cheating. Pretty much. But it worked, and he got away. And also the referee was always this side, on the left hand side. So he took it away. And the referee couldn't really see enough. Didn't want to go on the blind side too much. Want to stay in the bigger part of the ring, and he got away with it. And again, you're pulling all the time, and Crawford's doing nothing but holding and leaning, and he's doing what you do to your opponents and tiring you out.
Spence said afterwards, he said he was strong. He was a lot stronger than I expected.
He got that wiry strength, haven't he? That's the same with the power. That wiry sort of like, you out the distance, but that arm sort of goes like this. And it just keeps getting longer and longer and longer.
It's the physical strength. Like we spoke about that. He's developed into this kind of predatory puncher. Really, Crawford is not, as you mentioned it beforehand. It's not something that we really necessarily associated with him earlier on in his career as a dynamic knockout artist. But that's what he's become. But you don't automatically think about the physical strength of him and the fact that he's able to hold his own on the inside and able to kind of bully fighters in that way. And that's something that we saw.
Because when you're young, if you've got fast hands, I say this all the time, you've got fast hands, you throw when you've got speed, you sometimes rush stuff because you've got speed, you try and be too fast. Well, actually, you don't need to try. You've got speed, you don't rush it. Like, and if you've got power, you even go, ah! You got power. You don't need a tent. You're taking it away from you. You got speed. You feint it. You do it too fast. No one sees the feint. So I imagine when he was a bit younger, Crawford, even though he could punch, because he got fast hands and fast feet, he's probably too much on the balls of his feet. But now he's getting a bit older and he understands things slow down for you a little bit. You see things a little bit better, clearer. He sits down a little bit more. So he still uses his speed really well, but he engages more. His legs are a little bit wider than they used to be. So he sits down, engages those big muscles, takes his time, and then explodes into punches rather than all those little movements before that he might have done. Don't do it so much now, and that's probably as he moved up in weight, he's generating more power. That's 8 fights as a welterweight, 8 stoppages. Like we all talk about the power and strength of Spence, and we're going, hang on, this guy here is a wrecking machine at this weight.
Right, before we move on and talk about Anthony Joshua versus TBC this weekend, Andy, who next for Errol Spence? And we're going to caveat it with if all things being equal, and then you can say, because I think we all expect to potentially see the rematch. But anyway, ideally, who would you see next for Spence, and what do you think we'll see next for Spence?
Well, I think we will see the rematch next because he will take it. And to be honest, I feel like he may as well, because when you've got to the level he's got to, what is the point really of dropping down to get a confidence boosting win against someone? Like what is the point?
You're not going to fight Sebastian Formella.
The only other thing is move up in weight if it really has become that difficult. His pride will mean that he'll have to take the rematch. And actually, if I was in the Errol Spence business and thinking about what was probably the best move for him, it probably would be that rematch because it's going to be big money again. And you just keep a close eye on him, and if it's going the way in the second one that it went in the first one, you get him out of there quick.
Barry?
Boots. That's what I want to see.
Spence boots?
No, for Spence.
Spence.
Oh,
I was going to say, Barry, come on.
He won't win any other fight except Crawford. That's the one he'll want. But moving up in weights, that's the imperative. And then, if you can't get, if Crawford fight, say if they don't go that way, then those belts are going to be fragmented. They said but the other belts might go as well.
Yeah.
So him and Zoo would be a good fight. Spence is still a good fighter, by the way. Maybe there was signs there that he's lost it, but against Crawford, arguably said everyone's showing those signs.
And Crawford said that he'll go up to 154 as well. Said after the fight, look, it's not easy for me to make 147. I was going to box Charlo anyway,
but I think Spence is going to win that fight. I think we can't talk about any other fight. That's the only fight that he'll won. And also that rematch clause was both ways. They got both.
So if one,
whoever wins or loses can still.
But the winner picks the weight.
Oh yeah, but Spence, Crawford.
Okay. But Crawford said afterwards, it doesn't have to be at 147. Do 154.
He'll do him a favour, to be honest.
You say that. No worries, mate. We can do it wherever you want.
So that's the fight. I don't think. But I can't say it's a winnable fight.
No.
I mean, we'd have to see something totally. Now we've seen them both in the ring together. You'd be a fool to bet anything but Crawford, and it'd be the manner how he does it, because I think he'd be favoured to stop him again.
Yeah. Okay, my opinion for what it's worth.
Sorry, what was your
my opinion? So I think the fight that he should have will be Keith Thurman at 154. Is a fight that I think that he should have.
Yeah, good show.
But I do think that they'll take the Crawford rematch. Controversially, I think Errol Spence should retire. I don't see what keeps him in the sport. I mean, by all accounts, depending on what you listen to, between $30 and $35 million for the Terence Crawford fight. He's had pay-per-view checks since then. I agree
with you on that. But he won't, will he?
No, he won't. Yeah. He won't. And look, I've been on the Spence side of the Spence Crawford thing for a long time, and it's certainly not through any kind of negative or, there are fights out there. The Thurman fight would sell. He could win that fight. You would expect him to win that fight, considering what Thurman's been through. He could have the Crawford fight for $30 million or $20 million, depending on when they do the maths after the first fight. But I just don't see what's keeping him in the sport now. I think while Crawford's still boxing, I don't think Spence will ever beat him. What we saw on Saturday night, I think, just reinforces that. Maybe he could have never beaten him. Wherever he goes, I think there'll be that Crawford shadow over him. He has had a very serious car accident, a very serious eye injury. I'm not a neurologist, so I'm not going to go into whether he should or shouldn't for whatever brain reasons. But at this point of his career, family, all of the stuff they've been through over the last few years, making that money and being, the guy at welterweight for a period of time. Yes, there will still be fights for him like there was for Froch and like there has been for so many other fighters.
But it won't ever be the same level again.
Yeah, and I just don't... I think putting him in with Terence Crawford again, considering everything that we saw on Saturday, I just don't see how you could put him in there and expect him to do anything different. And I know fighters and trainers will have their own mentality, and there's a reason why a fat, out of shape prick like me is sitting here and not in the gym with the fighters. But I just think that now would be a really healthy time. No, I agree.
That's
my opinion. I don't think it will happen.
No, but it won't happen, and that's why I said, if you're in the Errol Spence business and you really are in it with a view to the fact that you actually care about him, you know that he's going to do it. Okay, so we'll do this, but you just keep a close eye on what's going on and try and get him through that with as little damage as possible, and then say, listen, let's call it a day now, because it'll take quite a long time probably, but at some point he will look back on his career and realise what he achieved, and the fact that he couldn't beat Crawford is nothing to be ashamed of. It'll take him a while to get there.
It won't be that now, for sure.
It'll take him a while to get there, but and he'll never be proud of the defeats because they can't be. It's just how it's how they are. It's just not something they can ever be as proud of a defeat. But yeah, maybe it'll take 10 years, but at some point he'll look back on it and think, you know what, I did a lot. Yeah. The fact that I couldn't beat him,
You said what keeps him in the sport. That defeat keeps him in the sport.
Yeah, it does.
You can't be proud of a defeat, but you can be proud of a performance in defeat.
Yeah.
And he can't be proud of that performance.
No, that's there you go. That's why he has to go do it again.
You go down swinging against it, like you step up a level like I did, and you weren't good enough, but you go down, you keep getting up all the time. So I'm proud of that, even though I got battered. The guy was too good for me. But he's in a fight where the guy's not too good for him. The guy's just as good as him, supposedly. And he just wasn't in the races, and that's got to be hard for a fight like that to get over.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't go out off the back of that. I don't, unless medically or physically, you really can't do it anymore. But as a champion, they can't do it.
See, I've been saying this. You had to go. You tried this. You weren't great. If I was wanting to retire and I was his close family or whatever, I'd go, listen, like, this is it for you. Like, you all the car crash. I'd use all the excuses. You're too tight for the weight. But you had a really good go. You just know if this was 3 years ago, those things would have worked for you, and I do that. Just go. You've earned that money now. Because I worry about fighters fighting too late. Like, fighters have a longer career now, or fight more late into life. They turn pro later and they fight for longer, which is great because the training equipment's better. Everything. They know more about their bodies and all the rest of it, which is fantastic. But you're taking punches later in your life. Most boxers were looking for retirement by the time they got to 29. Now it's like, I'm 35 and I'm just in my prime. And you might be physically, I don't know, but I just think I worry about just taking punches later in your life. You're not going to weigh it up yourself because it's your career, and you're just solely thinking, I've done all the hard slog to get to this level now where I'm going to earn some decent money, or great money, but decent money for most. Well, no, I should be looking for retirement. No, I paid my dues for getting peanuts all my career.
Yeah, that's what
and now you want me to go and walk away. And you don't think about your life. You think about your kids and your family. And I'll risk my life so they can have a nice life. And we all do the same. And we all do this. Anyone who got a kid would do the same thing. But like, that is a worry for me. That they got in your mid-30s now, and you're still, and you're in these fights and you're getting punched in the head, and you've got issues before as well. I think I think the problem with Spence, he got those eyes. It looks like he's always in trouble. He looks like he's stoned all the time, doesn't he? His eyes are so, he got those big eyelids, and people are looking into it, and you would look at him and you go, oh, he doesn't look right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of kind of Twitter neurologists out there, which I'm careful of not trying to become one. But I just think, considering his career, the inactivity and the issues that he's had, I think now would be as good a time as any.
Purely from the physical point of view.
But I also understand that with $30 million on the table for a rematch, and the Thurman fight, which I think would sell, and again, it's a fight where he could win. That's a fight where, okay, on the face of it, is not quite the step down that fighting. I mentioned him kind of tongue in cheek, like Sebastian Formella or someone like that, where you kind of dip down and have your fight. Thurman, who knows where he's at? I mean, he's calling out Crawford. He wants to do this. He wants to do that. But you just think, again, like, I feel like if he does carry on boxing, eventually there's an unhappy end to his career, in a sense of he finally gets to Crawford again and Crawford stops him again, and he might be fine with that.
But it almost always is an unhappy end.
Yeah, that's it. And that's why I do expect him, like, considering everything that I've said, I do expect him to still go that way.
You look at fighters' records, and I know we've had Mayweather and Andre Ward recently and Joe Calzaghe, but you look at fighters' records, and generally, even the very, very best, they pretty much say they'll lose 3 out of their last 4. They'll lose, and they'll think, okay, even if it's comprehensive, they'll come up with some reasons, and then they'll lose again, maybe to the same guy, and they'll think, then they'll drop down that level, get a win, and then they'll go back in at the top and they'll lose again, and at that point they'll think, actually, you know what? But it takes a lot, particularly if you've been that good, to convince you that you need to stop. And I just feel like the quickest route for Spence to get there, and this sounds pretty cold, will be another beating off the hands of Crawford. I think if he gets one, and I don't wish that for him, but I think if he gets one in his next fight, I think that'll be it for him.
Yeah, I agree. And
but also, it's not a place like this. Like we all got sympathy, empathy, or whatever. Or do we have a responsibility to care about the fighters? I don't know. I care about fighters. I don't see anyone get hurt. But as a pure fan, you're talking about adults here who know exactly what they're doing, should know, they do know the dangers, should know the dangers of boxing, and like we all do, and we take that risk. Otherwise, you'd never fight, would you? And it's a sport that you're allowed to do, and if they're passing their medicals, which was set in place, then it's not our place to tell someone what they should do or what they shouldn't do. So if he wants to fight, we want to see him in the best fights. I mean, coldly, that's how we should look at it, really. We should.
No, you're absolutely right.
If he's still fighting, he's still at a high level, then we want to see him in the fight. And if that's a fight he might get beat up in, well, that's the fight he gets beat up in. That sounds awful, then. You say
it's true, though.
That's the nature of the sport.
Right, what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if it wasn't like that, then we wouldn't have boxing, and that'd be that. But we do have it. And if it was invented now, it probably wouldn't be allowed. But it wasn't. It was invented a long time ago, and people have been squaring off on each other in one form or another for centuries, and people love to see it. It's the ultimate thing, and
if there's a massive
that
decline,
fascination is still there.
No, we're talking about boxers. I'm talking about boxers. What's going to happen late in their careers? But then, if we're going down that rabbit hole, then you'd ban all boxing, wouldn't you? Because
of course,
because there's an effect on it, and also you and the any sport, any contact sport, whether it be rugby, football, anything, you ban them all because the effects on your body, your brain, and certainly physically your body, it takes its toll on every sports person. So there's an argument you ban all sports. Runners can't walk properly anymore.
Yeah, there you go.
So
there's a risk attached to lots of things.
So if they're passing the medical, and this is an obvious effect to them, that we can see clearly. Like, there are some fighters out there we know that have a clear. Now they're still boxing now, and you can tell by the way they talk and walk and act that it's had an effect already. They might be passing the medicals, but you can see it has an effect. There may be a duty of care there. If you're not seeing those signs, but that might happen 20 years down the line, then that's not our business.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
And Tris Dixon's wrote a brilliant book about it.
If anybody
hasn't seen or read Damaged by Tris Dixon. Sorry, I'm trying to get an update on the Joshua fight here. Then please do so.
It's a great book, but why do you put my picture on the cover? I'm a dad. Damage.
But yeah, again, like just before we round off the things with Spence, Spence has been a brilliant fighter, and it's certainly not from any kind of he should fit. This isn't Nassim Hamed.
No,
you know, it comes from it gets to a stage in a fighter's career where they have that kind of fork in the road, I suppose. Fully expect him to carry on boxing, whether it's Crawford or Furman or whatever.
He's not getting any better, is he? I would say that much.
And on the back of a thrashing like that, and it's just never going to get as big as that again, is it? Like even the rematch is not going to be as big as that, and it's just one of those moments where you. But anyway, I think we probably see the rematch. But moving on, I am trying to get an update on what's going on with Anthony Joshua. We've just seen on Twitter that StubHub are now offering refunds because the event has been cancelled. So this could be an Anthony Joshua shadow boxing podcast. Because it looks as though he may not box anybody. I have one of my sources online now. So just 1 second.
I heard Chris Billham-Smith's up for it.
Chris Billham-Smith's up for it, yeah. We've got Chris Billham-Smith in the studio today. He's willing to step in at the last minute. I am getting a typing.
I just kind of felt like they would say they would get this show saved because they just really need to.
So the update I have is not yet, but show not off.
Yes,
so
I'm working, so I wanted to go on.
Yeah, me too.
Barry Jones gonna have
I remember the
Freelancers Brotherhood.
Remember the
over
Ben
here.
Eubank thing? Let's not go on to delve into that. But when that first went on, I was like, I'm working. Yeah. And then when they said they might go on, I was like, yes, I didn't care about the whole thing that someone might be taking drugs. I was like, I don't care, I got to work. Like, look, can I sue someone? Can I sue Dillian Whyte if that's the case? If he has normally taken a substance? Because I'm not working now, I'm losing money. I'm self-employed.
It's a really weird being self-employed.
Forget about them. What about me?
This never happened when I covered football years ago. Fixtures got arranged and they happened. They happened. You can be sure of that.
The boxing is getting to a state now. They might have to have 11 substitutes just in case on a main bill.
Right, so the update that I have is Anthony Joshua still wants to box. They're working on an opponent. So let's talk a little bit. We've only got half an hour or so left. We don't have an opponent to talk about with Anthony Joshua. So let's start with Dillian Whyte. I mean, I think one thing that we've really needed for a while is another drug scandal in British boxing. It's been a while. It must have been a whole week since we've had one of those. So Andy, going to come to you first. Yesterday, was it yesterday? Yesterday was the day before. When was it?
It was Saturday. Wasn't it?
Saturday. We found out that that Dillian Whyte, an adverse analytical finding, always such a mouthful when we talk about it. Ahead of his bout with Anthony Joshua, I'm going to close my WhatsApp down now. Massively disappointing. Andy, was kind of my initial feeling as I was tucking into a scampi and chips down the seafront, which was great. The scampi wasn't disappointing, but the news was. There's not really anything else to say about it that we haven't said about various other failed drugs tests over recent times. But a huge disappointment and a real, I feel embarrassed by it. We've come back from Vegas, not you, sorry. We've come back from Vegas for Spence Crawford at such a massive marquee event. And we have lacked over here this year for boxing. Of course, Chris Billham-Smith becoming world champion aside. We have lacked on the British circuit. And we finally, the two biggest fights of the last 12 months have both been curtailed for doping. And I don't know about you, Andy, but I'm sick of it.
Yes, it's pretty desperate when you get news of an adverse analytical finding or whatever we need to describe it as this close to a big fight, because it's
it was just afraid of getting sued.
Shout out the lawyers.
It is just so dispiriting. It is so dispiriting, and as you say, we got so used to having these massive events with Joshua and Fury in the UK in recent times, and there's been some other really big fights as well. When one threatens to fall by the wayside, and this one is, because even if he does box, it's not going to be against Dillian Whyte, then it really just takes the wind out of your sails. What I've been looking at more with this one is how it's been handled, really, in comparison to how the Ben Eubank situation was handled, which would have started almost exactly this time last year, behind the scenes at least anyway. And you look at the announcement from Matchroom, I found that interesting in and of itself, because they talk about how VADA gave the news to the promoter and the British Boxing Board of Control, and the fighters, I think, and just the wording of that statement was different to anything that we've really seen before. And then Dillian came out and said what you would expect him to say, which is that he's got no idea how this has happened, and that he'll do whatever he needs to do to clear his name. So that's kind of what I was looking at. But yeah, off the back of that week between Spence and Crawford, it's depressing.
It's embarrassing.
It is, but the only other thing I would say, we're not really across loads of other sports, we're not across any other sport in the detail. We're across this one, but positive tests in any realm of professional sport, as depressing as they are, ultimately they are a good thing, because if we didn't have any, what are we going to think then? That everything's fine, nothing to see here? If we didn't get any, it would be because the testing was inadequate and everybody's getting away with it. So to an extent, however we want to describe this, and I'm not going to do it again, adverse analytical findings, people have to kind of understand that people are doing this in all sorts of different sports, and positive tests in a weird kind of way are to be celebrated, painful though they are.
Painful indeed. Just touching on what you said there about the statement that was issued by Matchroom Boxing. Of course, following hot on the heels of Conor Benn and being cleared, which was still none the wiser as to what's actually happened between himself, British Boxing Board of Control, and UKAD. One of, if not the probably prominent fallout from that is VADA have jurisdiction? Do UKAD have jurisdiction over
Just one thing on that, with my kind of very pedantic, but I don't think it is pedantic, but kind of more news journalist head on. I was really surprised at how many outlets, including some big ones, just reported that as being Conor Benn has now been cleared to fight in the UK off the back of Eddie saying it. You know, Eddie's not going to come out and say something that doesn't have some grounds in truth and reality. But I was just quite shocked, actually, at how people just took what he said as basically being verified news.
Well, I'm shocked that you're shocked.
I was going to say, I wasn't shocked.
No, but I mean some established places I'm talking about, or places that I thought should have known better. I mean, I was sitting there just thinking, what?
It was one of the problems with
an individual on the inside of it with a clear agenda has said something, and you're just taking it as fact.
Yeah, and if they'd have waited a few hours, they'd have seen the UKAD statement, which basically says, well, you know, we do have a right to appeal, and the British Boxing Board of Control, I think the next day put out their statement as well.
You have to wait for those.
Well, yeah, because as you've mentioned there, it's not come from, there isn't an independent ruling. We're still none the wiser as to actually what.
No, we're really
what's actually happened there. The kind of what's been reported by some journalists, Riaf, of course, from the Daily Mail, who broke the story initially. A lot of the reporting has been that there's no jurisdiction over the test, that UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control don't have jurisdiction over the test. Ben is not a licence holder, it doesn't have a British Boxing Board of Control licence, so how can you provisionally suspend somebody who's unlicensed? But then you look at the Dillian Whyte instance, where UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control apparently do have jurisdiction over the test. The fight can be cancelled because the VADA tests have come back. It seems like almost the perfect way to follow on from the Ben Eubank stuff, but also the worst possible way to follow on from it in both the same
I
vein.
don't really follow it too much because it's just I'm thick, but I mean, you are what you are. But so they have no jurisdiction over those tests. So you're saying, like, if you don't have a license, you can take all the tests and fail all the tests you want, like for months and years, all your life, and then just stop taking the drugs and then get a license then, take a test with them, and then clear the test. But you've got a long history of just taking drugs and cheating all around. I'm not saying this is for Ben, just an example. And then so you've been cheating your whole career somewhere else, constantly getting caught, because you haven't got a British Box Board license. There's nothing to do with them. Once you want to get one of their license, you take their test, you pass their test. But they know you've been cheating your whole career. Does that have no? Well,
I mean, they would have the right to refuse you a license.
Yeah.
But
that's what they've done.
But if they were to license you, there'd be no problem.
So that's what they've done then. That's all they've done, isn't it?
But also, I'm not sure whether or not Dillian Whyte has a British Boxing Board of Control license either at the minute. which could be another bone of contention. I think the most important thing to kind of note here is that
Luxembourg are on standby now. License? Yeah, no problem.
We don't know what Dillian Whyte has failed for.
No.
So that's a big indicator here. I mean, from kind of my perspective, the fact that the fight has been cancelled, the fight has been cleared straight away, would indicate that it is something that you could fail a UCAD test for. It's not one of the whole instance around Billy Joe Saunders and Demetrius Andrade, if you remember, with the oxylophrin, the kind of...
In and out of competition.
Yeah, in and out of competition, depending on VADA and UCAD and the jurisdictions. It's all so boring, but anyway, we have to do it.
I love that.
But it seems as though
Yeah,
potentially there's
that's what
something...
nonsense that is.
Potentially, and we don't know the facts, that there could have been something that is banned in and out of competition. We don't know. Dillian Whyte has come out and said that he's going to clear his name and prove that he's 100% innocent.
I wasn't happy that he wasn't even consulted and everything was just canned immediately.
Yeah, which again, kind of when you look at the Eubank Ben stuff,
that sounds like the Rivas situation a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, the Rivas situation was a UCAD test.
No, the way that all the information was given out
because
made public, and he wasn't really.
Well, at the time, so the UCAD test for the Oscar Rivas fight, there was no obligation to inform the opposition, if you remember, which is why Oscar Rivas and their team had no idea about it. Whereas VADA, it's different. So Anthony Joshua and his team would have been notified of it. Again, haven't spoke to Eddie Hearn, haven't seen him come out and kind of give an interview or a statement or anything on it.
And that's been another interesting difference too, hasn't it?
Yeah, because
around
Ben
and
Eubank,
people could not stop talking.
Yeah.
Just couldn't stop talking.
But also, they were there, weren't they? It was like a press conference, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they decided to go on with the fight, which from Eddie's perspective was Eubank and Ben both wanted to carry the fight on. They both wanted to proceed, so he couldn't interfere. It looks as though that may not be the case in this instance. Anthony Joshua, who by all accounts still wants to fight this weekend, whoever that's against, didn't want to go ahead and fight somebody on the back of an adverse analytical finding. That's what it seems to be. But again, we are still waiting for information to come out. Dillian Whyte, as he's had in the past, has the opportunity to clear his name, has the opportunity
which he absolutely has to have.
Well, of course he has to have. But an adverse analytical finding, the third of which in his career, he did serve a ban earlier in his career.
He might be proved that he didn't take anything, or I don't know. He might get his license back, and it might prove that it was all misunderstanding. But the fact of clearing his name now, he's gonna, in the public's perception, it's going to be impossible.
And a week out from a fight where I think it's fair to say that this was. I mean, if he beats Anthony Joshua, goes on and boxes Deontay Wilder or whatever, but it was the kind of the big last payday, I guess. Certainly, if he lost, I don't see Dillian Whyte walking into another multi-million-pound payday if he gets knocked out by Anthony Joshua, if he were to be knocked out. So where's that big pot of gold now? Where's the big payoff? If he gets banned, which we don't know, again, we're kind of speculating because we don't have all of the details at the minute, then he's already kind of towards the end of his career now. You would assume that probably sees him sit out for a prolonged period of time. He had the Oscar Rivas situation, which was contamination. The UCAD statement kind of accepted the Team White explanation about contamination. Is he going to be able to do that this time? Barry's kind of alluded to there. Even if he is able to kind of prove his innocence or be cleared or return to box, is that going to be something that's going to be well received, and is he going to be welcomed by fans? Who knows?
Well, people just in this sport, people will pay to watch anything. I think that's proven.
Yeah, for sure.
Just all the boxing, Tyson Fury.
He might be boxing Anthony Joshua this weekend.
He might be, and people will pay for that as well. That's the thing. But I mean, it's just like Dillian Whyte, the Joshua fight's gone for him now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see him going through
Joshua
that again,
either shows, Joshua either crumbles on Saturday against anybody, including White or him, and then they have to reassess where he's going, maybe nowhere, or he showed, I thought it was the right fight for him, he shows a bit of grit and gets back to showing maybe potentially he can get back to where he was, but he moves, either way, he either disappears, Joshua, retires, or moves forward. He doesn't pause and wait on for a Dillian Whyte fight. Because this fight was always the view of looking good for the Wilder fight, I presume.
Yeah, and the fight to kind of bring a bit of the spite out of him and what have you. So, there's not an awful lot of information for us to go on here with Dillian Whyte. So with that being said, let's talk about Anthony Joshua. The two names that seem to be most likely for him this Saturday, Gerald Washington and also Robert Helenius. Barry with a very aptly timed yawn there at the mention of
No,
Robert Hellenius' name.
No, that's I just not heard that name.
It's the nervous yawn because I'm working on the broadcast. I
I've
think
not
they're
heard
both
that
great
name.
fights.
And he retired. He'd retired, didn't he, Hellenius? Off the back of
Whoa, hang on, it's a great fight.
that. It makes it a great comeback.
There we go, yeah.
Yes, everyone loves a comeback. It's a generational fight, I think.
Andy, going to come to you first. It's difficult, isn't it? Because no matter who Anthony Joshua boxes now,
He's on an absolute hiding to nothing now.
through no fault of his own.
But he's had a second camp with Derek James, and they will want to fight. I think they definitely will want to fight, and he's been in the business long enough now, Anthony, to know that this is a no-win situation for him. But I think he feels like he's been in a no-win situation for a while, because I was talking to somebody about this the other day, that he got so little credit for that second performance against Usyk, which I felt was, definitely an improvement on the first one, and against a really good fighter. I thought a pretty good performance, one that I think could well age really pretty well. Against Franklin, he was a little bit underwhelming. I think it's fair to say that, but he chose to win in the way that he did because he could. And we're not going to find out anything new on Saturday. Whoever he ends up going in with, he's not going to get that bit of spite forced out of him that we hoped would be the case if he was in there against Dillian Whyte. And I just feel like for him, he's just got to kind of accept all of that, and I think he would, and use the occasion and the fight for the best way possible for himself. But outside of all of that, I'd imagine that Matchroom will be pretty desperate, is probably the right word, to save the occasion, because they haven't had much luck since they signed that career deal with Joshua Matchroom and DAZN. It hasn't really gone according to script, and they need this to happen. They need this to happen with Ben Eubank not happening. I mean, it's, it would be a bit of a disaster, to be perfectly honest, if it got completely cancelled.
It is. It would be. It would be. I don't think it will happen. I think if Joshua wants to box, they'll find somebody. I mean, there's however many heavyweights on the undercard. I don't think it'd be Dempsey McKean. Can't see him boxing a southpaw on short notice. No. I don't think it'd be Philip Hrgovic. I think it's a dangerous fight. Particularly, you'd imagine Joshua, as cool and calm as he kind of appears on the surface, you'd imagine he's absolutely fuming at this situation.
Oh, he'll be livid. He'll be absolutely.
I don't think he's cool and calm. I think he's clearly. I think he's showing now he's not cool and calm. I think he's fed up with people telling him how he should be boxing. Is this gonna, like, if he boxes I go Washington, because it's a fight he can't lose, right, for a start, and I thought the Whyte fight, as we all thought, would be perfect. It would force him to be, it would show us that he hasn't got it anymore, or it will force him to fight and to be a bit more aggressive. Washington will be the fight that he should just walk right through him and blast him out there within 4 or 5 rounds, I would think. Or if he labours to a points decision against him, then literally we know exactly where we are. I would say that. Because looking good in our boxing at Washington won't be enough. If you have aspirations of going back to where you were and saying, this is another camp with Derek James, and we're just trying to box, and I'll box where I want to box. Well, you can. But, you can't expect people to think that you're going to be competitive against any of those top 5 guys.
But it wouldn't stop him getting that fight against Wilder. As long as he beats Gerald Washington, it doesn't matter. He could really stink the place out. That fight will still happen.
But I mean, but we're looking at the fight. But commercially, it'll still do well.
Oh no, I agree. Yeah,
but
I totally agree.
It takes a massive load of wind.
You want
out of sales,
if he destroys somebody, I said this all the time in heavyweight, especially building them up. Like, they give him all these small guys, like smaller guys who are hard and and can defend well. Why do you do that? Just earn their career. Just give them big lumps and then blast them out there. Because all people see is a big guy knocking out another giant. He might be a giant who can't fight, but he's a giant. And you're selling the heavyweights to a different audience. Not really selling them to the most part, to a boxing audience. You're selling them because they're going to transcend the sport. So you want all the people on the outside going, like Joshua. Everyone fell in love with Joshua who never watch boxing. Because, look at him. Big good looking guy, Olympic gold medal, talks great, and just beats everyone up. What's not to like? Yeah. He's not that guy anymore. Washington might show that a little bit, because he might think, I gotta do this now. Against Franklin, he was a bit more. Who's actually not a bad fighter and pretty tough. He was a bit too tentative, but he didn't want to commit to his punches. But he surely has to watch that back and think I could have done more, and but maybe thought I couldn't hurt him. But Washington has a track record of after a few rounds struggling for pace and falling apart. So you got to think, I know I can beat this guy.
He's a sparring partner.
They would have both of them are.
Yeah.
Both Hellenius and Washington are two.
Number two, Washington out in Saudi for the Ruiz rematch.
Yeah,
I picked Washington over Hellenius though, every time.
He knocked him out.
Yeah,
didn't he? Gerald Washington knocked Hellenius out.
No, but I would pick Washington.
You'd pick him as a fight over Hellenius.
Rather than
but the thing is, Hellenius, who was once upon a time, as we all know, kind of a highly fought after prospect, and he's had some decent wins along the way, got knocked out in a round by Wilder. So immediately you're putting yourself up against a quite a frustrating barometer there, because if you go 7, 8, 9 rounds of Hellenius, who has the ability to stink the place out as well.
He might do that. I think he can survive better. But also, he might be willing to go for it as well, because he might be thinking, this is my shot. I don't think Washington has that.
No, I agree, actually. Yeah.
So I think that would be the fight for him. I mean, he's going to be criticised. Whoever he fights, he's going to be.
Yeah, he can't.
That's what I mean. It's a hide into nothing, isn't it?
But he can't.
Been here before with the Andy Ruiz fight.
But what can he do, just for the sake of giving me a day's
fight for
wage?
Barry?
And then why not? He's selfish. Fight for the little man. But either way, I think he needs a fight. You know, he goes straight into the Wilder fight now after a long layoff. Then, and that Franklin fight where you didn't really know, and we're all talking about him and his trainer having that bond and one more fight and see how good they are together. If that's that important, then he needs to fight anybody, I think. So pick the safest option. And for the people who don't really know too much about Gerald Washington, they just see a big 6'6" and he's 6'7".
He's a big lump. Yeah.
He's a big lump. He looks the part. He was half decent in his career when he didn't box anybody, but he was looking good, but he's not that good at that level. He's not that level, so he should get blasted out there quite. It won't be a 2-round blowout, because Joshua was never this. I say this all the time. He's never this guy who just was like boring holes through people. He was boxing for a round or two, and then he was beating him up. So he was always quite thoughtful with his work, even when he was aggressive. And
an opening, exploit it really, really well. Really good finisher.
It's just
that's what he
all
wants.
Joshua needs is a good jab. He's lost his confidence in his jab. He's not stepping forward with the jab, which means when he's punching with the right hand, he's not punching through the target, and he's not getting full weight on the shots, and people are not scared of him. That's all he needs to do. He needs to make people wary of every time they let their hands go. And I've said this about other fighters. Every time they let their hands go, that if he hits you, you stay hit. Even if he didn't knock you out, he hit you. You know, a lot of his shots are accumulation. A lot of his knockouts and stoppages are accumulation of punches with Joshua. He used to be light on his feet. He'd be bouncing in and out. He'd be light on his feet, but he'd step in with a jab. Boom, boom, boom. That jab would just bust you up or stop you in your track, and then he'd go crack. Or he'd throw the left hook. He'd catch you with the left hook. He was committed, and he was committed. Once he knew he was going to throw a combination, he believed in himself and he threw it. And he just committed to it. And that's why you get there first with left hooks. That's why you get there first with the left hook with Dillian Whyte. He believes in himself. He does a lot of good things right, Joshua. He keeps his shape well, hands are high, nice and high, elbows are tucked in tight. He turns from the hips when he throws his punches, so he's direct and he's clean and he's neat. And for the heavyweight, pretty much that gets you pretty much all the way doing that. But if you don't have belief in yourself, stepping in with your punches that you can make an impact, he's touching all the time, and he's not enough. It's not enough for him. I mean, the level that we're talking, it's enough for him to boxing at this level, Franklin's and them lot, which is good, but not for Anthony Joshua. We're talking about Furies and Wilders and Usyks and whoever else is coming up, and Jared Anderson and Jalilov and all those people. We're talking about them, and he's just not looking.
Yeah,
he's not looking the far.
Yeah, he's lost his mojo, hasn't he?
Mojo.
And this was the one to get it back.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of the fear that I have. I mean, I don't have any skin in the game one way or the other, but for kind of a British boxing perspective, so if Joshua goes in there, the wind's been taken out of his sails because of this Whyte stuff. He goes in with a Washington who, I agree, after 4 or 5 rounds, I don't want to say he loses interest, but after 4 or 5 rounds, he's there to be taken out, doesn't have the greatest gas tank. But for 4 or 5 rounds, he can go there and stink the place out. He's one of these perennial sparring partners, been in every camp across the world with pretty much every heavyweight. What you'd hate to see is on the back of everybody's saying, this is the one we need to see from Joshua. Get the spike back. He goes in there. It is a bit of a drab affair. And then after 7 or 8 rounds, Washington is pulled out in the corner or something like that. That would just be... I mean, talking about...
That's the worry for every fight with him, though, isn't it?
Yeah, sure, but particularly now...
That could have been Whyte, though, couldn't it? That could have been Whyte as well. I don't think so the way Whyte is, but...
Yeah, because the way Whyte fights, he would have given him an option,
the thing is,
he?
Joshua is a good boxer, though. That's what I'm saying. He's a neat boxer. So, with Washington trying to stink it out, I think he can outbox him for rounds. And if he gets... The thing is, did the corner pull him out? Or is some sort of dodgy stoppage where... he's quit.
He gives up.
Yeah,
He's quit. Yeah, I think he can if he outboxes him, it's not the most exciting of fights, but still knocks him down and pummels him or knocks him out, then that's all he needs. That's enough. Because people will just remember the finish.
Just something where he stamps his authority on it.
And the replays and selling the fight and the recap will just be him knocking him out. But they'll show little clips of him boxing really well and then him knocking him out. And forget about the border pits in between. But that's pretty much most heavyweight fights, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at Fury Wilder won. Like, I thought it was a great performance by Fury, but it wasn't great to watch.
Yeah, the highlight reel didn't consist of loads of double feints, did it? It was the knockdowns and the getting up, and But as much as we love that, of course,
there were lots of double feints. But it worked for him. I mean, he boxed brilliant. But I just think that. But ultimately, you sell on that last bit, and not all fights, and even the second fight where he's pummeling him, there was big pockets in that fight where it was scrappy and not really a great watch. But you just remember with these big guys, you just remember the big moments. And because those big guys, when they have big moments, they're huge, aren't they? And I think that would be the same for Joshua if he can get that big moment in a fight. And I think Washington's the bigger chance he got to get that big moment.
Yeah,
there's always a good chance in these kinds of circumstances that he might get in there looking to really take some proper frustration out. And
that's what you hope.
You can argue that that's maybe not the best thing from a kind of mental point of view and all the rest of it. But sometimes those kind of more base natural instincts just can serve you really, really well. You never want to be emotional, and that's what we always hear about fighting. And I completely agree with all of that. You read all of that, and you speak to people, and you can understand why that's definitely the case. But sometimes a bit of raw instinct and anger and frustration is against that kind of opponent. Maybe that is what you need, because he's well past the point now, Anthony. I think he's at that stage, and he has been for a while, where he's a bit bruised by this whole business, by the criticism, by the way that people turned. Yeah. And it is more of a middle finger up. I'm not doing this for any of you anymore. I'm doing this for me. It'd be interesting if they get it over the line, maybe like right now or in the next few hours, and then we all trot along on Wednesday and Friday or whatever it is, and it'd be interesting to see how he is.
But
just mood wise.
It is for him. I know we're saying we want.
Yeah, of course it's for him.
We want to see him do this, but I mean, for him, it's a great thing. If he blasts someone out there now, I think for him, it'd be great for him.
Yeah.
Oh yes. I wasn't going to knock anyone out, but I mean, the fact that you just go, you've got to go back and you go, especially when the people are doubting you're doubting yourself. You got to be doubting himself. Why just what? Remember a few years ago when I was just like this and everyone was scared to fight me, and even the people who wanted to fight me, you could just see it in them. They were wary. No one's scared of me. Everyone fancied their chances. Everyone think I'm technically getting better. I'm learning loads of new stuff, but I just me just beating someone up again will just give them that buzz. Macklin says it all the time. It's true. The momentum in a fight, but in a career as well. And for you to have that it's as long as you do mentally. If he batters it to somebody, it might be Gerald Washington, who he should beat 10 times out of 10 any day of the week. He's still done it to somebody, and that just starts the ball rolling.
Yeah, and it brings confidence. Like smashing a centre forward, smashing in a load of goals against a substandard team, a batsman piling on a load of runs.
I can't do that either. Thanks.
But it does. It works. It does work. You don't fool yourself and think that it means something that it doesn't mean. But there can't be anything better for any fighter, but particularly a heavyweight whose currency has always been the ability to knock people out. There can't be anything better after not having done it for quite a while, doing it. And just feeling that shockwave up the arm and watching your opponent fall, knowing they're not getting up, that adrenaline spike. There can't be anything better for your confidence than that, can there? I wouldn't have thought so.
No, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and just he goes to bed that night thinking, yes, I'm on the way back.
Okay, right. Well, that brings our very, very short Anthony Joshua versus TBC preview to a close. Hopefully, if they do announce an opponent, it's after 5 o'clock when we go live. We've got about 5 minutes or so to talk about a brilliant fight this weekend that we haven't spoken about as of yet. The WBO super featherweight title, Emmanuel Navarrete versus Oscar Valdez. Barry, going to come to you first. Fight that has kind of been positioned for a little while, I think, by Top Rank. They're very good at that, aren't they? Bringing those fights in and making those big in-house bouts. A really good fight this weekend, one that I think will catch fire.
Yeah, it's a great fight, isn't it? It really is. Like I fancy Valdez to put him to sleep.
Really?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Again, I don't know why, because Navarrete always finds a way, doesn't he? But I just think, like,
last performance was a concern for Navarrete, wasn't it?
I don't think he's been the same. Super bantamweight, he looked like a wrecking machine.
Yeah, it was just massive, wasn't it? Do you remember he boxed like every 3 months, didn't he? Like,
and he's winning world titles everywhere. But I just think it's that being so big for the weight was a massive fact, because he jumps in from outside the distance. He's here, and you're safe, and because he got a long reach and he's tall for the weight, he jumps in the distance as well and he catches you all the time. But against someone like Valdez, who's known for his toughness and all the rest, but Valdez is a really good boxer, really well schooled, and he showed that against Berchelt. Let's not forget that the Berchelt fight. No, I know he beat him up in the end, but I mean, the way he boxed him, like, it was at stages, was just superb. I thought he was going to get hammered in that fight. I did, and he was just absolutely fantastic, and he never loses his composure even when he's hurt, Valdez. And I just think that jumping in with Navarrete jumping in, I can see Valdez just sitting there confident, waiting for it, and just going bam, leaning back with the left, blocking the shot, leaning back with the left hook, catching Navarrete off his feet, with his feet in the air, and just putting him to sleep. Face forward, boom, exactly. Put a bet on that.
Face forward, there we go. I mean, his last performance against Liam Wilson was a big concern up at super featherweight Navarrete, because again, he doesn't have the physical advantages.
But so when you're big and unorthodox, which he is, you get away with loads of stuff, but then you can also get hurt, like he did. But you get hurt, you're on the balance. Again, you're taking shots where you're not centered to the ground, or your feet off the floor. You can't absorb the punch. You're going to be all over the place. He still rallies back and all the rest of it. He's good at what he does, and he'll cause Valdez plenty of problems. He will. I think the uppercuts through the middle, and he'll throw lots of punches, and he'll happy to stand there with Valdez at stages. But I think it's a great fight, and it'll be all action. It will, and I think it goes late.
It's a really interesting stage of both of their careers as well, because we've seen Valdez coming up short against Shakur Stevenson. Obviously had that brilliant win over Miguel Berchelt, then had an adverse analytical finding for fentamine.
And just drove over to another state then.
Yeah, carried on boxing. And I thought lost to Robson Conceição in that fight. I thought Conceição boxed his head off. Yeah,
but I think but Conceição and Stevenson are just two master boxers.
Yeah. Of course, much different style-wise.
So I think that's always good.
But we've now got Valdez is kind of like, it's this sort of like, where is he at in his career sort of. He had the win over Adam Lopez, who had already beaten, and Lopez is a good fighter at a level. He's certainly not at the world title level, certainly not at this level. But it's interesting to see where he's at. And then on the back of that performance from Navarrete, this isn't Navarrete at super bantam or even featherweight. It just looks as though maybe he's topped out size-wise. I thought he should have gone back to featherweight.
Yeah, I do as well.
After that performance.
Maybe he was chasing the names, but they've all gone away from him now. So Valdez is the only name around, really, for him.
And he is massive. Maybe he has, because he's still fairly young as well. Maybe he's grown and he's struggling to make the weight. I don't really know, because he's quite fleshy, isn't he? There's not like the probably look at it. Yeah, potentially.
I think a little bit, but he's good. And also when you are battering people left, right, and centre, you have an arrogance. It's just winning. When you don't lose, you have an arrogance. You can't get beat. But when you're beating people up, or even when you get hurt, you still find a way. Well, I got hurt, but look what happened to him. I finished him within the distance. By the way, don't forget that. So he'll think, well, it doesn't matter what happens to me, because I didn't fall over, or I got up, or I didn't. No, it wasn't a massive panic. I still got rid of you. But he'll struggle with Valdez. Valdez's technique is very, very good, especially with that left hook, and within the action, he sees it.
Yeah, he loves it. Doesn't he? He's proper Mexicano. He loves to have a trade up.
That block and fire. He's really good at this. So I think that's why I make him a big favourite. But it's a great fight.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I would fancy Valdez. I mean, I'm slightly biased towards Valdez, to be honest, because I just always really liked him. He's unusual for for a Mexican fighter, because I'm pretty sure he went to 2 Olympics, which is, I mean, nobody does that in,
they don't even
Mexican
go to one,
boxing.
really.
You know, you think about,
you can't go to the Olympics when you're 15, can you?
Well, yeah, well, this is it. You know, and he would have been, and he got those 2 done at a young age, and I just feel like he's probably in a spot where, although he's done really well and he has achieved a lot, he won't be happy. You know, he'll feel like there's unfinished business, and that he's maybe not got the kind of plaudits that he would necessarily deserve, because other people have kind of come up on the rail behind him and gathered more attention than
Stevenson.
him. Yeah, exactly within his own promotional stable as well, which that's never. It's like being on a Formula 1 team where you're the number 1 driver and all of a sudden you're not. You know, it just wouldn't feel good, would it? And
the back end might be for Navarrete in this fight as well, maybe.
Yeah, I would fancy Valdez, because I think it's really important for him, basically, and I do think he's better.
Yeah, it's an interesting fight. I'm not really sure which way I'm leaning towards it, to be honest. I'm not really too sure, but it is a fight that is definitely happening this weekend. So therefore,
at the time of recording,
it's the fight of the weekend anyway.
At the time of recording, it is definitely happening.
At the time of recording, thanks very much, Andy. That's a professional broadcaster there. But yeah, no, it would have been anyway. Even if Joshua Whyte was going to happen, this would have still been the better fight. Certainly the fight with the more meaningful result on the world stage. I don't think Joshua beating Whyte or vice versa really has that much. Okay, it impacts on the Wilder fight, which isn't a world title fight, but super featherweight, particularly now where it's kind of like Stevenson's moved up, and like there's super featherweight seems to be like, you got a Sharky Foster there, and like it seems to be a bit open at the minute. Joe Cordina, yeah, there we go, Joe Cordina.
Typical English.
I don't know. I don't know. It's a close fight. I'm gonna be the contrarian, and I'm gonna go to Navarrete points, which is based on nothing other than the fact that Andy and Barry.
Where is
Valdez. It is
a drug-free zone
in Glendale, in Arizona.
Okay.
You're actually right. Yeah.
Anything goes.
Yeah. Anything
Definitely
goes.
Valdez. Anybody that have a neck like this.
God. Any lawyers who want to get into touch with us after this, just contact Barry.
I got nothing to give you. You can take my kids.
You can have the money that he would have earned this weekend. But anyway, that's all we've got time for here on the Boxing Show. Thanks very much for a very kind of wishy-washy episode here at ID Towers, as we eagerly await the news of Anthony Joshua's opponent this weekend. Let us know who you think it should be, or if this is already out by the time he has one, let us know who you think will win, Anthony Joshua or Andy Ruiz Jr. in the trilogy that the world has been waiting for.
This whole week would have exploded. It would have been amazing.
Joe Bugner would be a good fight for him.
But Ruiz for the trilogy would have been, from absolutely nowhere, would have been incredible.
Imagine the shape that Andy Ruiz is in right now.
He wouldn't care though, would he?
I tell you, he looked in good shape in Vegas.
Who?
Oliver McCall.
Was he there?
Did you not see him? They had Hasim Rahman.
I saw Rahman. Yeah,
Oliver McCall was in really good shape.
I didn't see Oliver McCall.
Just saying that, Anthony.
There you go, Oliver McCall, mate. Yeah, he give you some rounds. There you go. Yeah,
all the drama of a crying ring walk.
I was going to say, I'll be very impressed if you go through him in a couple of rounds, even now at this stage. But anyway, that is all we have time for. Thanks very much, as always, to our esteemed panel of guests, Mr. Barry Jones, and that absolutely wasn't in Las Vegas, Andy Clark. Thanks very much for stopping by, and we'll catch up with you next time.
That's what's on my mind.